Good morning and welcome to Sunrise to Sunset with Pastor Gene. It is Tuesday, September the 15th, and it's a wonderful time to be together with you. Today we turn to Matthew chapter 16, and we're going to be looking at verses 1 through 12, and then tomorrow we will look at verses 13 through 20. In the first 12 verses of Matthew 16, you have the Pharisees and the Sadducees, and they're coming together to test Jesus, to show them a sign from heaven. To show them a sign from heaven. It's almost like they want to believe, but they got to have proof. They want to believe, but they got to test Jesus. They want to believe, or they don't want to believe. They want to prove Jesus a fraud. Now, I don't think they can do it. You know they can't do it, and we all know that. But there's this constant effort on the part of certain Pharisees and scribes. This constant effort to get at Jesus, to do everything they can to upset him, rather than to work with him. They'll do anything and everything they can to test him and to challenge him, and to really make life very difficult, not just for Jesus, but for everybody else in the community of faith. And this next section, beginning with verse 5, I want to read you this, verses 5 through 12. When the disciples reached the other side, they had forgotten to bring any bread. Jesus said to them, "Watch out and beware of the yeast of the Pharisees and Sadducees." They said to one another, "It is because we have brought no bread." And becoming aware of it, Jesus said, "You of little faith, why are you talking about having no bread? Do you still not perceive? Do you not remember the 5 loaves for the 5,000 and how many baskets you gathered? Or the 7 loaves for the 4,000 and how many baskets you gathered?" See, that's twice Jesus has provided food. "How could you fail to perceive that I was not speaking about bread? Beware of the yeast of the Pharisees and Sadducees." Then they understood that he had not told them to beware of the yeast of bread, but of the teaching of the Pharisees and Sadducees. Now, I think it was back in chapter 13, maybe 14, verse 33, I know that. But back there, Jesus actually said that the kingdom of God is like yeast. And that was a positive presentation of yeast. But here, the yeast of the Pharisees and Sadducees, and Christ points this out 2 times to the disciples. Twice. Gives them not just says this thing about yeast, but also cites the 2 miracles, the feeding of the 5,000, the feeding of the 4,000. 2 times he says, beware of the yeast of the Pharisees and scribes. Now, what does he mean by that? It only takes a little bit of faith to begin a great walk with Jesus. And it only takes a little bit of trouble being stirred up in a community of faith to not be able to feed those who need it. We're living in a time right now, folks, where there's a little bit of anger, a little bit of hostility, a little bit of selfishness, a little bit of arrogance, a little bit of rudeness and irritability. And just that little bit seems to start a whole heap of trouble. So beware of the yeast of those who would bring trouble. And look for the yeast of the good news of God's love for all in Jesus Christ, from sunrise to sunset.